we approve the agenda then?
I make a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Notes from November 14th.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from November 14th as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're on to our first public input. The first public input is on agenda items only. So I don't know if the public's had a chance to review the agenda. And if you have any input you'd like to give us. Going once, going twice. I just wanted to have a chance to look at the agenda. Okay, so I'll close the first public input and we'll go on to informational items. The enrollment for December of 2022. Any questions or comments? Looks like we have 616 students between the high school and the elementary. Any questions for Tim about the enrollment? All right. Financials, November 2022. So, Heidi, you have anything you want to say about your financials?
No, I can answer any questions.
Any questions? All right.
I have a question.
Okay, sure.
And we may have touched on this before, sorry if I've asked this already, but in 1100, the salary where we are over budget, can you explain the 75,000?
We can check. We can check. We need to check.
Yeah, I don't recall
You don't know off the top of your
noticing
head.
that before.
I think it's due to the substitute teacher moving to that line,
Okay, interesting.
but I will double check and get back to you at the next meeting.
Okay.
So if that's the case, the money's the same. There's a law in New Hampshire that requires anybody serving as a substitute for more than 20 consecutive days to be treated as a teacher. That means paid on the teacher's scale and offered the same benefits as teachers. Previously, there's a building-based full-time sub in this building who has been treated as a para-educator, a paraprofessional, but isn't under this law because she routinely takes on assignments of more than 21 days duration. So this could be, if that's right, and we'll check, just sort of an indicator of the budget impact of making that move. But that
Yeah.
should mean that the money came from somewhere else.
Yeah,
we
and
can
that
find
sounds
for you.
familiar, like we talked about that
But you
before,
did
but it
tell
seems
me.
like 75,000, that may not
Seems
be the full amount.
Yeah.
There.
Right.
It may include benefits.
That's
though.
high.
Whatever you
Not
say.
in that
Include
line
benefits.
though.
We'll
Oh,
figure
true,
it out.
it wouldn't be in that line, you're right. Sorry. All right, any comments or questions about our magazine we get every year, every month, sorry? Okay. Superintendent's report.
Making a note here. Okay, so I have, my report items align with items on your agenda. So if you want to wait until we get to each thing, that's entirely up to you. I've got a report on the TAs with the Alton Teachers Association on behalf of your negotiating team. We could do that, well, wherever you want to do it, but you'll deal with this under personnel or as an action item. I'm not even sure where we put it. I have some guidance for you on some of your policy items, particularly your discussion of policies JBAB and the procedural accompaniment JBABR, which again, I can hand those out and talk about them at that time,
Okay.
if that works for you. And I also have a memo that's in your packet on the warrant articles. But same thing, when you deal with warrant articles, we could do that then.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sure. All right, you're up, Matt.
Thank you. December 14th, this Wednesday, we will have an early release day with Alton Central and Farmstead Elementary. The 14th is about collaboration with the focus on aligning our curriculum, continuing from our October 7th meeting. The ultimate goal is to have all the I can statements attached to standards at the appropriate grade levels. Construct student can statements as a result of that. Identify the skills the students will possess in order to show a mastery of that particular standard, and then create a scope and sequence. While obviously that process won't be completed on the 14th, it at least starts to give the roadmap of our work for the rest of this school year, and possibly looking at some summer curriculum time to finish it up. And so the goal will be is that we will have these I can statements with a scope and sequence that will be implemented at both elementary schools moving forward. The Professional Development Master Plan Committee continues to meet. We met on December 5th to continue updating the master plan. We feel like we're in a good space where our next meeting, which is on December 21st, we feel like we would be at the point where we can then present it to both the faculty and to the school board in January for them to take a look at the draft, and then make some revisions based off of the feedback, and then we would be sending it off to the state for their approval with implementation for next school year. In your package, you also have the SAS results. This is a similar format that we used at Barnstead in terms of looking at the data over a period of time. We broke it out as an overall proficiency in reading, math, and science. We also took a look at how our students who are special ed, how they're faring as well within our testing cycles. As you know, we had 1 year, the 1920 year, where there was no test for our SAS. And previous, when I handed out the previous, and I think it was in October, that gave you a focus on where we stood compared to the state. This is just how we're doing against ourselves. So if you look at the reading portion of it, again, if you look from 2016-17 to 21-22, pretty consistent for the most part. Certainly not where we want to be, but we're consistent. If you take a look at the reading for our students with IEPs, again, there is a consistency, a little bit of an increase in terms of the proficiency from the 2021 school year. And then we're looking at the students being tested, because oftentimes there's this piece where less kids are testing, therefore our scores may or may not be reflective of that. We do see a trend where less kids have taken the test, but again, there's no correlation in terms of the way that works. So basically, we have to hit the 95% level, and if anytime we hit the 95% level after that, anybody that opts out is a 0. So that's how that works, so that can negatively impact that piece of it, but it's a small percentage that's impacting that.
And Matt, this page is just the number of students, right?
Correct, yep,
Okay.
yep. Actually, I have some handouts if people that are sitting here want to take a look at them as well. Yeah, that's just the number of kids.
Yeah. So there were 13 with IEPs, and then all students, there was 200.
For reading.
Yeah.
That was just, so this one is just the how many students were tested?
Correct.
And then this one is gonna give you your breakdown
Oh,
of.
I see, okay.
I'll tell you why we did that.
Okay.
And we wanted to look at how many students were tested each year, because there's been an assumption. I almost said an understanding, but I think it's been an assumption that after the pandemic, more people opted their children out of testing, and therefore the results would look different. So I think by being able to see the results on one page, and then, if you just look at NHSAS reading over these 6 years, really 5 because of the year with no tests.
Right.
And then you look at the year with the number of students being tested dropping all the way to 179, as opposed to 297, 250 in the other years, there really isn't that big a difference in the scores. So part of the reason for us doing this was to help dispel this idea that somehow the pandemic is responsible for whatever we're seeing in test scores. It's pretty clear that over this 6-year period, the scores are pretty close.
Yeah.
So the effect of the pandemic, I don't think, is really an excuse for us. I think our students are doing about the way our students have been doing. I'm looking at least at the overall proficiency chart in reading. right?
Yeah.
Over a long period of time.
Right.
So it's what we do, I think. It's not, there was this disruptive pandemic and therefore, we have new issues. I think if we have issues, they're the same issues.
So
There
are
are-
these not looked at year over year? Because if we've been doing this poorly since 2017, why has it not been addressed until now? You probably can't answer that
We'd have
question
to ask
because
the
you
people
weren't
who
here.
worked here.
I know, so, I guess all we can do is move forward, but.
Well, you had the adoption of the new math program, so that went into effect last year. So hopefully we'll start to see some of the results based off of that.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yep, with Lucy Calkins, the reading program. So again, there's been things implemented, and hopefully we'll start to see those results over a period of time.
So I agree, these results are mediocre at best when we look at this. I think this is the first time these have been presented to us this way. I think typically we have seen these reports in the past where it breaks out grades and then it breaks out, percentages, and it doesn't, it was hard to read those pictures all together compared to looking at these from the overall students. So I wish we'd seen something like this before. However, I know we saw when we were looking at grade levels, there were disparities, pretty big disparities between grade levels. So this doesn't show us the whole picture either. My other question is, we have a breakout, we have overall student proficiency, I'm looking at reading, and then we have the IEP student breakout. So my question would be, why are we not seeing the non-IEP student breakout, just to understand what that looks like? Although it looks like the participation from IEP students was only 13 students, so it really must not have had a very big impact on the numbers from 2021 to 21-22. So again, this shows us that our students are testing mainly below proficiency, if I'm reading this right.
Yep.
And similar in math.
And that's information we certainly can bring to you in the future and break it all out that way as well. I mean, in October, we did break it out based off of grade levels, and we looked at a trend over the current freshmen, and we went back to when they were in fourth grade to kind of see what their trend looked like, and we can continue to do that over time. But we can certainly give you that other information at the next board meeting.
I mean, it seems to me it would be helpful, and teachers pipe in, not to look at each individual grade, because I think that was confusing, diluted kind of what we were looking at before as far as test scores, but perhaps look at middle school, right, and then grades 3
Clusters.
to 5,
Yep. We can do
more in
clusters, yep.
groups, whatever makes sense.
And I think what's
Age-wise.
really important is the teachers have time to go through the data and figure out what strands need to be improved. I mean, they have to be able to mine the data, and they need to have the time to do that. So that's really one of the issues, is that we need to give them that time to figure out where they need to start focusing on, or even start doing some remediation with some of these kids who are lacking a skill. So I think with an IEP child, of course, by the nature of an IEP, they don't necessarily have on grade level skills, and they're trying to bring them up, but it's going to be reflected in the reading scores that they're not quite there at grade level yet. And that's where the proficiency.
Of course, this is one test, I know we're also testing with, I always say it wrong, NWEA.
Niwa?
Okay, well,
NWEA.
close enough.
I say that acronym wrong. Does it make sense to kind of look at this side by side rather than one test in isolation? And Matt, I know you talked at the high school about, really looking at our standards within the school and what our goals are and how that relates to what we're seeing on the state testing, and whether how relevant the state testing is to competency-based learning.
Yeah, and one of the things, with the help of Shay, we were able to take the information from each of the grade levels in those standards and break them out as to where we are, whether we're below grade level, at or approaching or above. And that information will be shared with faculty and staff in January, and that kind of gives a nice picture of the different standards that are there and how we're doing and where we can focus our attention. And again, we can drill down into those standards even further, but at least it gives them an overview of where we stand as of the 21-22 test.
And also, when we're receiving tests like this at the board level, I'd really appreciate if Shay could come to the meeting. You're new, and I think we need some of the historical background there also.
Absolutely. We can ask.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, informational technology report.
It's probably the same as you saw last week because it applies across the system.
Okay,
Yeah, it looked the same to me.
looked the same to me too. All right, any questions? I'm sure Matt would love to answer questions, right, Matt?
Oh, wait, we have Matt. Let's see.
No questions? Okay. We'll move on to your report then, John.
Awesome. So we started our trimester 2 on the 5th. Report cards actually went out last Friday without a hitch, thankfully. And that goes in part to the work of our IT department, so I do want to thank them for that. Our ACS enrichments made the December 1st Baysider, if you didn't check it out. We actually have one of the teachers here that's responsible. Our students created their own mini golf courses and learned about budgeting, force, and motion. So if you didn't, I think it's in the backlogs of the Baysider if you go to the Salmon Press website. But it was a pretty cool article. Title I had a very successful family fun night on the 6th of December. We actually had 38 people attend, which is a new record. We usually have about 8. So that was it was a really successful night. The winter concert for K-3 was last week on the 7th. Congrats to Mrs. Grasso and Mr. Nevu and our amazing students. They're so cute. If you didn't catch it, it's just a fun one. And then tomorrow night at 6:30 at the high school, our grades 4 through 8 band and chorus will be performing at 6:30. So. I was sitting in with the band today. They're sounding great. They're ready. It's going to be a great performance. So if you're around, 6:30 tomorrow at Prospect Auditorium.
It's nice they'll be in the auditorium, because last year we were in the gym.
It was nice to see an article in the paper also. I know we used to do that on a more regular basis, so it'd be great if we could submit something like at least once a month or something to inform the community what's going on here.
That is definitely a goal of mine to get it back up. They stopped publishing us for a while, so this was actually a test because I knew I had a full-on
It's a
article,
test.
and we had about a full-on article, and I think it was 5 pictures. They published 1, but we want to get ACS back in that Baysider more regularly. So I agree with you 100%.
Sorry.
We've gotten down to the building and grounds report, Pam.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, John, that you want to add?
Not off the top of my head.
All right. Any questions for John? All right, on to the building and grounds report. Just a few minor heating issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, did they not work, the boilers?
Let me see what he put. We had an issue with boiler room here. This boiler room right, like literally across from us. It had not a backfire, but it puffed back. It's a issue with the initial installation, and the company is coming. I think it's in this report, but the company is coming to remedy that over winter break. So.
Okay. It looks like we got funding for our window, huh? That's cool.
2 grants, yeah, two school security grants, one to replace the door access system and another to install a sliding window with bullet-resistant glass between the entry vestibule and the main office so that people picking up or dropping off items in the main office won't have to be admitted to the school building. They can just come into that secure space, work through that window, and then go.
That's great. It's hard to wait outside in the cold when you're picking up a child. Any questions or comments? All right, we're on to action items. 23-24 budget.
So I did have one change. I needed to increase the SAU billable to other districts. I missed a line, so I apologize. So I increased the budget by $1,200.
Okay.
But again, the SAU billable to other districts is there, you'll look at the revenue side of it and it's offset, so really it's not a impact.
It's okay. So you need us to vote on this, correct?
Do we go to the town budget committee this Thursday?
Um,
I do. We do. I do and I do. It'll be great.
That'll be great. You love those things.
So you have a bottom line that is, for next year, reduced compared to the current year. I think it's important to mention that on the record in a public meeting, that the proposed budget is about $100,000 less than the current year budget. That does include a reduction in costs at the high school of about half that amount, $46,454. Nevertheless, it means that administrators and staff and the business administrator work together to find places to become more efficient here at Alton Central School. So we're going to be able to do it again next year for less money than it cost this year.
That's great. All right, do I have a,
So you just need a motion to
Yeah.
approve the budget? So I make a motion to approve the operating budget for 2023, 2024.
Second.
any more discussion?
Should probably read the amount to the record.
Do we need to read the amount?
We do need that, yeah, we need the bottom line.
Do you want to,
So the 16
Yep.
million, $41,076.
Mhm. Okay, any more discussion?
Heidi, is that the final prospect number?
Well, we're still working on the JMA Budget Committee, and then it'll come back to the full board, and you'll have a final vote, and that will make
Right,
the
but this is the
final.
number that we brought
It
to
is.
JMA, okay.
Yep, yes.
Joint budget, I mean. Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, there you go. Have it for tomorrow night, or whenever you're going.
Thank you.
All right, so the budget updated was what you told us earlier, Heidi, with the, okay, estimated revenues. Do we have to make a motion on that? The estimated revenues?
We always vote on the revenue? I think it's just
Okay, well, it's on the
information.
agenda, that's why I said,
Yeah.
okay. How about the default budget? Do we need to vote on that?
That you need to.
All right, so where is the default budget?
Page after the
There you
summary
go.
revenues.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the 15,931,791.22.
So can I have a motion for that, please?
I make a motion to approve the default budget of $15,931,791.22.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussions or questions?
Well, I'll just point out that the default budget is 109,000 roughly less than the proposed budget. Heidi, what are the main components that bring us under, just because that's always of concern, because that would be funding that we lose that we've planned on in the budget, operating budget?
Yeah, health and dental, you can see the difference there, even though, well, there was an increase, but there were a lot of plan changes that really affected that this year, in the FY '24 budget. New Hampshire retirement, it went down in FY '24. That was one. The regular and special ed tuition was another one that was a big one, that we decreased in FY '24 compared to FY '23. And those are contracts that we.
So these are fixed costs, so if the default budget goes through, we'll have to find monies out of other areas of the budget in order to compensate,
Right.
just so we know.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that the default budget is lower, but it has significant
It
impact
does,
on what
yeah.
we need to spend on for contracts.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're on to warrant articles.
So there's a memo from me in your packet. Or are they all in mine? No, I just have two. Do you have one, everybody?
I have
Looks like
this.
Yep.
Right,
Yeah.
along
Yeah.
with, so there's the warrant, so you have a draft warrant,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have my memo, because there are some decisions here for you to make. You might want me to go in the same order as the warrant itself, which, so on the first item on my memo aligns with Article 2 on the draft warrant. So we had a request from you, and we also received a letter from the school district treasurer inquiring about stipend amounts for both school board member and district treasurer service. And you can see I've provided for you on the front page of my memo a comparison. Thank you, Debbie, for doing the research of this district's stipends for the chair and other board members and the treasurer compared to some other districts in the area. If you seek to change stipend amounts, then it requires a warrant article, but this district received guidance in the 2017-18 year that if you do not seek to change stipend amounts, then those are just what's included in the budget, and you would simply delete this warrant article and not propose it. So that is up to you.
Anyone have a proposal, or you want to?
Well, I just want to point out a couple of things, because it's always awkward whenever the board talks about increasing its own stipends. One is that our stipends are, except for the treasurer, are lower across the board than Barnstead. And two is that we're members of two different boards. So, you know, compared to some districts, we have twice the responsibility. And then the other one is that when somebody is serving as chair of the JMA board, that's a pretty significant responsibility, which also carries no additional, you know.
Right.
So,
I think the chair should, I think there should be an increase in the chair position. I feel like that is a more involved position. I guess
Mhm.
that's my 2 cents on it.
and I think the other point is, we give a stipend of $500 to the budget committee representative. One could argue that it's, you know, a similar amount of work.
Right. Whew. Well, it's hard to talk about your own salary, see, so. I mean, I have no objections to trying to bring it up to Barnstead's
Mhm.
amounts for everyone. I mean, right now, our district treasurer is making more than the Barnstead cohort, but the
Mhm.
others are making, and they do serve on two boards, just like we do, so.
Yeah.
I have no problems bringing that forward as a warrant to match Barnstead, but I don't know how everyone else feels about that.
Debbie, when was the last time these changed?
2017 was the last time we were increased.
2017.
5 years.
Okay. So I guess I would make a motion that we increase the salaries for the chair and the board members to match Barnstead.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the district treasurer, we need to decide on that. She's specifically saying she would like more. She wanted to go up to 2,500.
How difficult has it been to find a treasurer and to keep a treasurer over time? It is difficult.
Yeah.
And she's elected, so it would have to be somebody that'd be willing to run and be
Mhm.
elected
Right.
by the town.
How much
people.
time does it take?
She's there once a week, every week.
I personally have no
And
objections.
she does go to the bank
Mhm.
too, so.
I have
Yeah.
no objections to raising
I don't
it.
either, I don't feel like it's like
She's
it's
not
an
asking for a
exorbitant.
huge amount,
No, it's not a
Mhm.
crazy jump in numbers, so.
just for good faith, she's been,
I make a motion that we increase the district treasurer to 2,500.
Second?
any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay, first warrant's all done. Operating budget, we already did, correct?
So on collective bargaining with the Alton Teachers Association, on the second page of my memo, I provided you with an overview. At some point during tonight's meeting, you'll want to entertain a motion to ratify the TAs to this agreement. There have been 20 tentative agreements made between the parties. If one of you wishes to jump in and do this instead of me, go right ahead, but otherwise I'm prepared to keep going. The agreements are primarily designed to make the Alton Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement match the Prospect Mountain Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement. That is the vast majority of what was proposed and discussed in this negotiation. Those items include some relatively minor housekeeping, such as length of lunch periods, electronic posting of vacancies, which previously have only been posted on bulletin boards because that's how we all used to do it. Matching language regarding layoffs and reemployment, substitute pay, professional development, sick leave buyback provisions, again, all to match the Prospect Mountain Teachers Association agreement. The sick bank, same thing, there are minor differences remaining, but largely they've been made consistent. This helps our office administer these provisions by having them not all be different, where you have 6 collective bargaining units. With regards to paid leave, family leave, again, same thing, making them consistent with the Prospect Teachers Association bargaining agreement. The cost items include a pay scale that is, again, in the first year adjusted to match the high school teachers scale. The off-step cost of living adjustment is 3.59%. That's a weird number, right? Normally, you might expect a more round number than that, but that is because it matches the scale in effect at the high school. And then the second, third, and fourth year COLAs are 3.5%, 3.5%, and 3% for a 4-year agreement. The purpose of a 4-year agreement is now that the schools in Alton and Barnstead are functioning more like a single system. We've developed a schedule, first at the board level, but the associations so far have all been agreeing to this, to space these agreements out so that there will never be 3 bargaining agreements on the same warrant in either town in the future, which seems to make sense for the taxpayers. So that's the reason for a 4-year agreement this time around. Subsequent agreements, if all of these are sort of maintained after we get through this the first time, can just be 3 years each, and everything will roll. In Alton, that will mean 1 year with 2 agreements on the warrant, a second year with 2 agreements on the warrant, then a year with none, followed by a year with 1 agreement on the warrant, a year with 2, and a year with 1. So it becomes a 6-year cycle, but never 3 bargaining agreements on the same warrant before the voters. Longevity payments are increased. This is another cost item in this agreement, again, to match the amounts agreed to by the joint board with the high school association last year, the year before.
It was last year.
Sabbatical language, early retirement language, again, changed to match the provisions in the high school collective bargaining agreement. And these tentative agreements also include a change in healthcare. This is important to note, that the open access green plan that has been in effect in these schools is the most costly form of healthcare available from school care. This tentative agreement includes a change from that plan to a choice of two other plans available from School Care. One is called Yellow with Choice Fund. The other is called Orange. There's a theme to how they do this. And compared to current healthcare costs, this change in the first year will save between $45,000 and $60,000, we project, included in the cost estimate for the purposes of the warrant article. We are showing a savings of $45,272. It's sort of a conservative estimate because until employees pick their plan, we don't know exactly where that's going to land. So it's possible the district will actually save more than that, depending on the choices employees make when it's time to enroll. But you don't get to know that until after
Right.
the agreement's ratified and the warrant's gone to the voters. The total costs, which you have in a chart and a grid there in front of you, and this is new money, so this is, anything additional that this agreement is projected to cost. So it's both increases and then savings, sort of netted out. It's $216,932 the first year, that's fiscal '24, next school year. That represents a 5.82% increase over the same cost items in the current budget. In the second year of the agreement, fiscal '25, we estimate a total new money cost of $210,955. That's 5.29% above the previous year. In fiscal '26, we estimate $202,181 in new money. That's 4.84% above the previous year. And in the fourth year of the tentative agreement, fiscal '27, we project new money totaling $176,100. That's 4.02% above the previous year and I'm not expressing my opinion, I'm trying to speak on behalf of the groups, your negotiators and the teachers associations, but following a year with a 5.9% federal COLA last year and well over 8% inflation this year, this seems like a good combination of wage increases for employees, also some benefits savings for the district. You enjoy that every year, right? It only shows up the first year, but that's money you're not spending on healthcare every year following, and generally those are hard changes to get in collective bargaining. And then on the other side of this, the security, the certainty of a 4-year agreement in what may be uncertain economic times seems like a benefit to all.
May I say a couple of things?
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that many of the teachers in the Alton Teachers Association did work with the same teachers, the longer-term teachers that are at Prospect Mountain as well. So when you go back to before Prospect Mountain High School was built, there's, several teachers that worked together at that time. And that played into our, it felt fair to make longevity the same. And longevity works depending on which school you started in and switched to. Alton is comparable to districts around the lake, but certainly not the highest salaries around the lake. So we definitely want our teacher salaries to be competitive when we're attracting new teachers, because our strength is our teachers, really. I don't remember the number, but of all of the districts around the state that use school care, something like 90%, Tim, have moved to the consumer-driven health plans.
So the yellow or orange plans if they're
Yeah.
in school care.
So, so I think it's great that these teachers are willing to really consider it. It's a new plan, it's a little confusing. It's just a new thought process about healthcare that they needed to work through, and they put a lot of effort into really thinking about it and going through it. And then, one feature of the consumer-driven health plans is the out-of-pocket cost is a little bit lower for the teachers as well as for the district.
And I
So
just-
this is a very agreeable negotiation, very professional, and we always appreciate negotiating with the ATA. Everybody comes out of it feeling like a win-win.
And this is my first time negotiating with the Alton teachers, and I have to say they were so flexible and so willing to listen to what we had to say, so willing to get people in to talk to them about the healthcare plan. They brought people in to present. They brought them back again. They called them several times just to make sure they had their information correct. And, you know, I appreciate their flexibility and their willingness to learn what was going on with healthcare. So I just wanted to add that because it is my first time negotiating with them. I used to negotiate on the other side, but now I was on the school board.
I think it sounds fantastic. I mean, I like that it's consistent with the high school. And I think a 4-year agreement is great.
Mhm. Well, it gives us we have a lot of people who have hung in there in Alton
Mhm.
for many, many years, and we have to give them that credit, because we've had ups and downs over the
Mhm.
years, and so I really appreciate that they're here for our kids, so I just wanted to say that also, so. So, we need to have a motion.
I move that we accept or ratify the collective bargaining agreement with the ATA, as well as approve the warrant article.
A second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, there we go. All set.
Next on your proposed warrant. Sorry. Is your half, yeah, thank you. It's on my memo. Yeah, you're already aware of the bargaining agreement with the Support Professionals Association at the high school because you are half of the joint board that already ratified that agreement, but on your warrant, we print the Alton School Board recommendation as well, do we not? Yes, we do. So you're looking for a
Right.
motion on that.
I move that we accept the warrant article, number, where are we at?
That's
Five.
five.
For the collective bargaining agreement with the
Should be six.
Prospect Mountain Educational Support
It's
Association.
actually Article
Six.
6. It was a
Six.
misprint.
Oh, did they
We'll fix
move?
that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's a typo there.
Second.
Any other discussion? We've already discussed this one. All those in favor? Any opposed? All righty.
Okay, so you have discontinuation of expendable trusts and capital reserves. A couple of years ago, it was actually just before we started, so whatever year that was. You had a warrant article to eliminate some old expendable trust and capital reserve funds that had very small balances in them. And then Heidi swept that money into one of the other funds or the general fund, into the general fund by the authority granted by the voters on that warrant. 3 funds were left behind, and we're living in a no fund left behind world. So we would like you to run this warrant article to eliminate these 3 funds and then allow the little balance that's in one of them to be swept into the general fund.
I move that we approve Articles 6, 7, 8.
8.
To discontinue the expendable trust and capital reserve fund. I'm gonna read them out. Capital reserve fund for the water heater, the long-range building maintenance expendable trust fund, and the window replacement expendable trust fund.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just for the public record, the fiscal impact of that is $134.73. But it's a bookkeeping thing that has to be dealt with every year. So now that will go away, pending approval by the taxpayers, the voters. In Article 9, you have the $150,000 planned item. It's the third in a 3-part cafeteria and kitchen renovation project. You did Part 1 2 years ago. Part 2 last year was about $109,000. That was approved by the voters. That's for the kitchen equipment itself. This is the final piece. This $150,000 would go into the Buildings and Grounds Expendable Trust Fund, and then presumably, hopefully this summer, all the work would actually be done and the kitchen renovated and that project finished. This is something that the CIP committee is aware of and expressed support for as well.
I'll
That-
move that we accept warrant Article 9 for $150,000.
Second,
Any questions or discussion?
could you just remind us what is included in Phase 3, since it was a long time ago that we approved the phases, because we skipped
I would
a year
love
on
to.
this.
Isn't
I think it's the actual maintenance.
It's the kitchen itself. I think you did the cafeteria first and changed it. This was right before our time. And then last year's warrant article provided the money to purchase the actual equipment for the kitchen, but taking the old equipment out, changing all the finishes, putting the new equipment in, that's what this is for.
And the freezer, was that done this year or is
Yeah.
that next year?
That would be part
Part
of
of
this.
this.
part of
That's
this.
what I
That's a
thought,
big
didn't
part
we,
of
Uh,
something
no, they
about?
still-
Like a
right now they still
walk-in or
walk outside.
something.
We don't-
You
Yeah.
want to be able to go to the freezer without walking outdoors.
You got
We don't talk about kitchens again for 10 years or so
After
after this,
this?
maybe 20.
Oh, thank goodness. But the cafeteria looks great. A lot of the parents
This
are
will be
really
that
impressed.
final step, which, like, if you look into the kitchen, how it doesn't really match the caf, that's,
This
it's
will
the
do
final
it.
step to finish that off. And the freezer is definitely a part of this, because they're still walking outside to get to it.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
So on the long-term capital plan, you have sort of a revolving plan to replace boilers. Remember, there are 5 boiler rooms in this school. That's one of the gifts of a school that was built and then added onto and added onto and added onto. So even though we just did a boiler project summer before last, we start preparing for the next one immediately. That was to be $110,000 or $120,000 per year, but because of the article you just voted on, when we met with the CIP committee for the town, they talked to us about maybe reducing that amount this year, but then increasing it for the other probably 4 years, which is what we agreed to do. So this is an $80,000 item to start putting money in there. You do have a specific fund for boilers, the Boiler Capital Reserve Fund. And then subsequently, we would anticipate coming back with a $130,000 item next year, but we won't have the kitchen next year.
Right.
So for this year, it's an $80,000 article to start feeding money into that fund for the next boiler replacement.
I move that we approve Article 10, a warrant article for $80,000 for the Boiler Capital Reserve Fund.
Second.
Any more questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
The next two you already know about, so I don't need to talk about them unless you need me to talk about them.
I
No, we have to
move,
approve.
You have to do something, but you don't need to hear it from me again.
that we approve Article 11, which is our portion of the Prospect Mountain High School Technology Expendable Trust. And the total amount's $30,000. Our portion is $15,192.
Second,
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then we're on to the last one.
I move that we approve Article 12, the Prospect Mountain High School Athletic Field Capital Reserve Fund. The total, again, is $30,000. Our portion is $15,000. Because this is a capital reserve fund, this one is 50/50.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All righty. All right. So we're on to the next.
So I'd recommend that you treat policy in 2 sections. First, the policy booklet, which are all the same policies that you've already seen at a joint board meeting. These are all of the recommended policy changes, either due to changes in state or federal law that the School Board Association told us about. This is actually only about a third of them, because the night that we went through them with the Joint Board Policy Committee, we eliminated more than half because they were not required and didn't seem to make sense for whatever reason. So these are the same policies you've already seen once before. The only differences are any place where there was something unique and specific to the high school, it's been changed to reflect Alton Central School, but otherwise, these are the same policies you've acted on recently. And they're only here for
So
first
these-
reading.
First reading?
Hmm?
I said if I missed it.
Yeah, and if we missed one, we'll try to
So
catch
these
it.
are first reading.
So these are for first reading.
So
All right.
I move that we accept the policies in the policy book, as well as the withdrawal
Mhm.
of policy ICA, which is a school year, school calendar policy.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? This is just the first reading, so we're not approving them anyway, so, all right. All those in favor, of first reading?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And then the second half of policy, you have some items in your packet, and I've also tried to provide some additional structure for your conversation in the form of recommendations that you may or may not take. At your last meeting, you asked me to speak with your attorney about these policies, which I've done. And he confirmed some of the things that I think everyone here suspected, and then added a little bit of new information as well. So the first thing that I have in this memo, and if you let me run through it, then you'll go
Yep,
wherever you
that's
go
fine.
from there, is that all right? Is that the non-discrimination policy for Alton Central School, which is policy AC, hasn't been updated since 2015. When House Bill 1319 passed in 2018, gender identity became a protected class under state anti-discrimination law. So you should, in my opinion, add the term gender identity to this policy, which I've attached. It's the second page in what I just handed you. So you add those two words in the first sentence. There's a note down at the bottom that should be struck, and that's the end of that. This is a change that was made at the high school, and we have two more. This is a change that was made at the high school after the law passed, and it's one that should be made here. So that's recommendation number one, which I think should be relatively straightforward for you. Number two, and this really goes to the heart of the matter, as you've been discussing it, I have one more extra, if anyone wants it, is that there are a couple of different perspectives on these policies, JBAB, around New Hampshire right now, and every interpretation is being challenged. So whatever a school district has done, somebody is challenging that action, and there is currently a case pending that your attorney believes will end up with the state Supreme Court regarding a parental rights policy similar to the one that's been proposed to you and is in your packet on civil rights grounds. So if the state Supreme Court acts on that in the next 3 to 6 months, that could provide some clarity for you. At the same time, several legislative service requests have been filed by New Hampshire representatives and senators regarding both protections for transgender and gender nonconforming students and parental rights with regards to transgender and gender nonconforming students. And we don't know what the legislature will end up doing with those. In the meantime, if you adopt the change that I just recommended to policy AC, you'll comply with existing state law while we wait for more information about upcoming changes or not in the law, or interpretations of the law by the courts. Number three, we are required to have procedural guidelines for our staff with regards to protections for transgender students. So you might wish to direct me to do something I've already started doing, which is to develop written guidelines for our employees addressing at least the following 5 things. Staff qualifications to counsel students regarding gender identity, required efforts to include parents or to assist students in talking to their parents or guardians regarding gender identity, safeguards to ensure student safety at school and at home. In other words, references to our mandated reporting requirements for staff, guidance for school staff on use of names and pronouns, whether those are of a student's choice, and how and when that would be appropriate and allowed, versus when and how names and pronouns might be changed in the student information system. And then finally, access to bathrooms and locker rooms. And I checked right around the corner before coming into the room, and we almost have everything I like in a school. The only thing, we have single-use bathrooms that anybody can use by themselves, which I believe is how human beings like bathrooms. The only thing missing is indicator locks that are red when there's somebody in there and green when there isn't somebody in there. And I'll have to find out from Mr. Asdot whether or not that's possible, because these are steel doors. But we'll look into it.
Steel?
Because it's really the easiest and best way. Like, everybody
Right.
likes privacy.
Right.
Forget gender identity. Everybody likes privacy. And then fourth and finally, if you accept and approve the changes I've proposed to policy AC, just tell us to update the anti-discrimination statement that's printed on the website and printed materials and everywhere else, wherever we have it, to include the word gender identity. The only thing I skipped over is that while you're waiting for the Supreme Court and the legislature, you may wish to rescind policy JBAB, which is almost certain to change one way or another. And again, the change to policy AC would ensure that you're compliant with state law. I'm done. It's all yours.
So we should at least change AC right away, because that's something we need to include. So could I have a motion to amend?
Make a motion to amend AC to include gender identity and delete the note.
Do I have
A
a second? Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye. All right, so we have that. And we need to, you don't need a vote on instructing you to change everything, do you?
I'm going to do it. You can tell me
Yeah.
not to.
No, you go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
All right, we don't need to
great.
vote on that. So now, Rebecca and I did meet with Tim this afternoon. It was, it was close to the board meeting, so it was hard to kind of assimilate everything. I don't know if Rebecca wants to speak to that part too, but, we talked about the policy. Tim had recommended we rescind the policy and come up with procedural guidelines, which, again, I try to listen to our superintendent, so I think that works, but it may take time for you to get there. I don't know, because I was at the meeting, and Rebecca, you can certainly speak too, but it feels like this policy is going to change anyway. That's what I see, okay? The policy proposals that Rebecca had made had come from Somersworth, is that right?
Yep.
That's something they have adopted now. I like the idea of procedurals for the staff members, because that gets very concrete about what they should do if a child comes to them, as opposed to a board policy. To me, that's not as concrete. And truthfully, as a teacher, I read my board policies, but it wasn't like a procedural
Like a handbook.
guideline,
Yeah.
a handout to me. It was a whole different ballpark of policy versus procedure. So that's my 2 cents with that, but I know other people want to speak, so. Anyone else want to give some input on rescinding that policy?
Well, my feeling is, that we don't really have a reason to rescind the policy, that we should keep it in place until we have any type of legislation that would require us to make changes by law. I think the procedural guidelines really are in support of the policy. I mean, they really could be an addendum to the policy. I think there are reasons that we have policies, in particular in regard to non-discrimination and anti-harassment. And I think this is a population that needs our support. I don't see any reason to rescind it. I don't see that the policy is harming anyone. I think it is supporting a safe and supportive educational environment. And if legislation changed and gives us reason to relook at the policy, I think that makes sense. But I don't see any reason to take away protections at this point. And I think procedural guidelines would simply support the policy.
I guess I didn't really see it as taking away support. I kind of see it more as simplifying and giving a clearer direction for staff I guess teachers, staff, whoever.
Mhm.
So I guess that's sort of my view on it. I just looked at it through a different lens.
The problem with rescinding the policy tonight would be that the procedural guidelines haven't been developed yet. That's what I thought of afterwards. I thought, wow, if we rescind the policy, right? You haven't developed them all. Oh, you
Working
have.
on it.
I know.
Started 2 hours ago.
So it's kind of in flux.
It's in flux in my
Yeah.
mind, right. No, we don't need to approve the procedural, do we?
I think given the level of interest here, I'll bring these to you. Now, I've already been talking to administrators across the system in all 3 schools about these topics, because everybody wants to know what to do, right? A kid presents in front of me saying whatever the child is saying, I want to know what to do.
Right.
Right, so, and I appreciate the meeting that we had today, and I like that you suggested the procedural. Rescinding this policy, I also do not think that's taking away any protections per se. I feel like this policy, which is not required by law, is very broad, and it leaves a lot of things open. I think the procedural steps that Tim is proposing and coming up with will still offer protection for this gender of students or whatnot, but also have it a little more streamlined. I do also want to add that if we do continue with specific policies for the gender identity, you also need to have a policy for every other protected class that's listed, including religion, sexual orientation, so on and so forth. So unfortunately, if we're going to have a policy for one, we need to have a policy for all. So I think coming up with Tim's suggestion of the procedures and having steps rather than this broad policy is something I'm in support of, in favor of. And again, it doesn't need to be voted today. I think Tim's going to work on that and then propose it at the next meeting and then take a look at that. But even the procedures that we talked about today still, protect the students, and again, it's just not broad, and we want to recommend that they're talking to the school counselors, or not just their teachers, and people are not directing them in directions that they shouldn't be going without parental involvement.
So perhaps we should table decision tonight so that Tim can bring to the next meeting the procedural guidelines to give people a better idea of what that looks like. And then next month, put it on the agenda for, a vote to rescind or not to rescind. How's that sound?
I think
That'll
that's
give people
very
time
reasonable.
to sort through it all. This is a hot topic, obviously. And I think everyone on this board wants kids to be safe. We know that. So we just have to make sure it's done correctly. And Tim's going to get those guidelines going, and then, consult the attorney, make sure that those are protecting the kids. But meanwhile, we do have our anti-discrimination policy that we just voted on. So that's really helpful. So if you could take the time, I won't be here at the next meeting, so Karen, you're going to be in charge of the meeting, okay? So you guys can hash it out after you finish. If you'll send me all that before I leave, that would be great.
I'll email it to everybody in advance of the meeting. It's not going to take me long to do this. I already
Yeah, I think it'd
did a
be
bunch of it.
easier if we saw it beforehand.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
It'll give us a chance to look at it together too with administrators.
Yeah, that'd be
Talk about
great.
it.
Do you need a motion for the last item, directing you to update
I'm gonna do it.
He already said he's going to
Okay,
do it.
sorry.
I asked him that.
Okay.
But it would be nice to get teacher input too, please. Ask the teachers if, about these procedures, see if they're doable, okay?
Been having some conversations.
All right. Always get the teachers involved. They're on the front line there. All right. Personnel report, we have resignation. Now I have to find all that.
I move we accept the resignation of Kyle Sterling, special ed teacher.
Second.
We really can't discuss it as personnel, so everyone in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
I move we accept the hire of Morgan Tufts as a para-educator one.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
I move we approve the FY '23 co-curricular stipends as listed.
Second?
Any questions or comments?
I have a question. So there's a professional development committee at the high school, which is made up of more people with significantly more money. I just
It's
think.
been collectively bargained
I
in the past.
understand that. I'm
That's
just
why.
saying there's really a disparity.
We missed that during negotiations.
Yeah,
What's up with
I
that?
just, I guess I just feel
I
like
didn't know.
it's unfortunate that the two committees are not more commensurate
Right.
with pay
Mhm.
if their duties are similar.
Not to get too much into high school business, but one of the differences between the elementary schools and the high school is that at the elementary schools, from what I've been able to find, and I'm looking for people to tell me that I've found wrong, PD master plan committees have existed when PD master plans need to be written, and then have not. Whereas at the high school, the PD committee has been a standing committee even during the 4 years out of 5 when a plan doesn't need to be developed. So I would argue
Yes.
that the elementary schools might have this right, and that might be a future change at the high school.
There you go.
That's
Sure they'll love to hear that.
fantastic. Yeah, well, that's,
There you go.
But this year, we needed everybody.
right.
The high school's under the first year of their collective bargaining agreement, and any changes we may have made in the contract won't go into effect until next year for these teachers.
Right, I'm just making the point that it's very, on paper, it would appear to be the same line, and it looks, if you look at the bottom line of 240 versus
More.
1,600,
Mhm.
that's very inequitable. So that's my only point.
Good point.
Okay, it's a great point. Any other discussion or comments? All right, so we've already voted on these, so we're on to the next public input. Do we have any public input?
I'm not sure we voted on this one.
No. I
Oh,
don't
you
think we
didn't
did.
vote? Oh, I'm
No.
sorry.
I got
You
it.
distracted me.
Yeah, I did, sorry.
Jeez.
And spoke
All
up.
those in
Yeah.
favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Thank you, Pam, for pointing my brain in another direction. All right, public input. Anyone have any?
Richard Shea, I'm glad to see some work being done on comparative data on the student performance standards, particularly since I'm an old engineer, I'm always interested in math. But I was curious, I have a couple of questions. One, is there some kind of a concrete full court press being engaged in with the teachers and the staff, faculty, whatever, to address this specifically? What I hear tonight is, gee, it's pretty mediocre. Let's move on to the next subject. And I would think we'd be close to a panic or at least a great deal of concern. And probably there is, and I just don't sense it here. I was also curious if you get feedback from the Prospect Mountain High School faculty concerning how well or how poorly our students are doing when they get there. These scores would suggest that they'd be kind of raising the roof about sending us kids who aren't ready to go. And if they're not raising the roof, maybe we're doing better than we think we're doing. I don't know. And maybe you've got a lot of detail on that, but if not, it certainly would be a source of indication of, or at least another measure of where we stand and where we need to go. And finally, when I was in Connecticut, the battles over school budgets were warlike, to say the least. And people would come out of the meetings panting and exhausted, speaking to their neighbors, and it was really nasty. So I'm glad to hear, as a taxpayer, I'm glad to hear the budget is lower, but just as a citizen, I'm glad to hear there seems to be a level of cooperation and civility that I didn't see in my former state. And one of the things that they squabbled about incessantly was class size. And I never hear that discussed here. I'm sure it's measured. I don't know if we're in great shape or not. But again, in Connecticut, if you had a class size of much more than 18 to 20 kids, the parents just went crazy. It was like you were dooming their kid to be a failure for the rest of his or her life. I always thought that was a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't know how much of a consideration it is in New Hampshire or in Alton. I'd be curious to hear. I don't want to waste your time listening tonight, but if there's something that I could look at reference-wise, and maybe it's just as simple as total head count compared to the total number of students, but thank you.
We've
Thank-
had our years, that's for sure, in the past.
Well, and that type of data, Tim would be happy to give you that.
I have all those numbers, I already looked at them.
You did?
Yeah, I have them all actually.
You memorized them? Oh, I thought maybe you were going to spiel them off there, Derek.
Roughly, roughly. Thank you for warming everyone up. Derek, on behalf of ATA, I wanted to thank Tim and Carol and Pam. Like you said, the meetings we had were fantastic. And it was funny, I think we had, 7 or 8 meetings?
Yeah.
It seemed like half of that. I was surprised when someone said, we're gonna have a 7th or 8th, and I was like, we already had that many meetings? It was just really nice, and not that we haven't had that in the past, but just to have a nice, friendly, supportive conversation, it was outstanding. So on behalf of all the members, I wanna thank you guys and the rest of the board tonight for supporting us. I appreciate it. 'Cause our teachers have been through a lot in the last few years, and I know they're working very hard. So to have your support it means a lot, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to, he actually mentioned something. When we hear the test scores are mediocre, that's tough to hear. And Carol, you mentioned having teacher input. As a teacher who puts in all these hours and all this time and to see the scores, I think there's a lot of stuff we don't hear. There's so many sides to that. When I'm proctoring a test and I'm looking at my laptop and it says, how many rapid responses come through. So we get notification of the kids answering too quickly, and you walk over and you're like, take your time. And then you go back and it's rapid response, and, or if it's a writing test and, the test gives you like 2 full pages and a kid gives you this much and you're trying to encourage them, do what you can without crossing that line. I think if we do have these conversations about test results in the future, it would be very helpful to have teacher input on those. And thankfully, everything I've heard from our high school has been nothing but great news about our kids coming up there. So I feel like we're doing a good job despite what those are saying. Like Matt said, we do have the new math program for reading and writing, so those take time. And I think unfortunately education, it's like every 6 years there's something new out and you try it, and then 6 years, and I don't think we'll ever have anything that works forever, because there's always something new out there, isn't there? So we'll see. But I just wanted to thank you all. I appreciate your support very much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Any other public input? In that case, I'll close public input.
Carol, may I just make a comment? I think that any detail about assessment and everything, feel free to call the SAU. I think they would be happy. That's the appropriate place to sit down and really talk with them about the test results and what we're doing.
If I may.
Yeah.
I would add that, so this is this administration, we're relatively new here as currently assembled. This is our first chance to look at a longitudinal history of student achievement in these schools, not just this school. And the format that's in the packet and that Mr. Jasokis shared tonight is a consistent format. It's simplified, yes, Karen, you made that observation, but it allows us comparative data. And this idea of proficiency, it's easy to get worked up about the idea, well, not enough students are proficient. Raise your hand if you know what proficient means, please. Because in this system, none of us do. And I think that's important. So one of the things that we will do, and as we get more and more on top of this, in fact, this is what it's going to look like because I did it during the meeting. These are those scores plotted against state averages. So now, regardless of what the word proficiency means, or whether it was an academic or a legislator, or whether that's a skills, but whatever that word means, now we have a relative measure, and we can draw some meaning from that, right? Whatever that meaning is, at least it gives us a frame of reference for understanding the data, right? Something other than this arbitrary idea of proficiency. Over time, this allows us, if we're consistent, then over time, this allows us to draw some conclusions about interventions we might try. And then the final thing for anyone who doesn't know is, this is why Mr. Drazokis is here. This is why his position exists. The two boards created this position last spring using funds raised by saving money in other areas through eliminating positions or because people left and weren't replaced. So without adding to the budgets, we created this curriculum and assessment position specifically so that we could work toward this kind of analysis. And this is the beginning, not nearly the end. That's it.
All right, so next meeting, we'll put that on the agenda to show the state under future agenda items. I think that
Averages.
it would be beneficial to see that comparison that I can see, but you can't. Any other agenda items you wanted to add for next time?
I'm going to have you some procedures under JBABR, and Heidi and I are going to look at that 1,100 salary overage, Karen.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? I won't be here, so, yeah, I can add everything. What do you think? All righty. Do we have a non-public tonight?
Deb has something.
I just want to, I reached out to the school district moderator to set the deliberative session.
Oh, okay.
And haven't heard back from her yet, but that date would be February 4th. The
Okay.
first Saturday, and the snow date would be the 6th. And
Snow
I'm
date
waiting-
would be 6, okay,
Right, and I'm just waiting for her to confirm that.
okay. Thank you, Deb.
I'm gone the second Saturday.
Do we have a non-public? Do?
Only if one of you wants one.
I don't have
What?
anything. Do you want a non-public?
Oh, no?
Okay, that sounds good. All right, next meeting date is January 9th, 2023. Can you believe that? 23. All right.
What's today, January 9th?
January 9th,
Nine.
2023.
That's my daughter's birthday.
I
Oh,
move
no.
we adjourn.
A second?
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
Hey, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Ho, ho, ho.